Cam Boozer was held scoreless in the first half, but he and Duke pulled away from Texas in the Dick Vitale Invitational on Tuesday night.
You are Locked On College Basketball, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's up, folks? Welcome into the Locked On College Basketball Podcast, a daily national college hoop show, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I am your host, Andy Patton, and you're joining us at the place to get your college basketball content every single day of the week here after the second day of the college basketball season. I want to thank all of you who have made this show your first listen or your first watch of the day. And of course, give a special shout out to those everyday listeners and those of you hanging out with us in the Locked On College Basketball Discord community. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5. And if your first bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets that you can use all across the app. All right, folks, Duke earned themselves a hard-fought win over Texas. Final score doesn't exactly reflect how close this game was here in the first inaugural Dick Vitale Invitational. JJ Jackson of Locked On Blue Devils is here to help break down that game. We're also going to talk after that. We're going to get into some of the other games that happened on Tuesday, some top-ranked teams that didn't really struggle. And then we're going to close the show on previewing our games on Wednesday. Not a lot of excitement on Wednesday. Unfortunately, the schedule kind of dims out after the first few days. But JJ, really excited to get the chance to talk about this Duke game that Duke was down at halftime to a good and scrappy Texas team and was really fighting hard throughout the second half to pull away from this team. Ultimately ends up a 15-point victory, 75-60. But I know you felt it. I know many people who were watching this game felt it and were very surprised that this ended up looking like a comfortable win, because it was anything but for pretty much 35 minutes of this thing.
Yeah, Andy, I think one of the crazy stats that I saw at halftime, kind of breaking down the run that Duke was had, the first 6.5 minutes of the game featured Duke only scoring 6 points. The next 6.5 minute stretch for the Blue Devils, they scored 26, which is where they were able to really create some rhythm and separation there. And then in the final 6.5 minutes, they went back to that 6-point total. And that's where you were able to see the lead that Kentucky, 3 points, 26, 3 points was the breakup there. And you were able to see the lead that Texas was able to have at halftime. So a really good kind of middle portion of that first half, but definitely one game into the season, still some offensive things that have got to be fixed.
Yeah. And really, when you look at that stretch in the middle of the first half, I got to imagine, without knowing the numbers off the top of my head, it was pretty much all Isaiah Evans. Like, he hit a bunch of shots in a row. I think he had 3 threes in a row. He looked very, very good in this game offensively. We mentioned Boozer did not score in the first half of this game. I do want to get into what we saw from Boozer in the second half. But before we do that, Isaiah Evans, a guy that has been on a lot of people's lists as a breakout candidate, somebody who, I think for Duke really want to see him be able to do more than just space the floor and hit those outside shots. He did a lot of that, but he did do some other stuff as well. Finished this game with a game high 23 points. Really, really impressive performance from him. And feels like he's going to be such a key hinge for this team to be able to reach the ceiling that they're looking for this year.
Yeah, it's so clear Duke wants to run so much of its offense through Isaiah Evans, and rightfully so. When you shoot as well as he does, he started game 4 of 5 from 3-point range in that stretch you're talking about. You're right. He was one of the big separators that Duke had in that sequence. And then also keep in mind, in that stretch is when on a couple of those pin downs that he had, it'd be a quick catch, and he found Gongba underneath for a couple of easy lay-ins and even a dunk that Pat was able to go up and finish above the rim. So he just creates so much gravity on the floor with guys following him and what he wants to do as a basketball player that, as Slim goes, Duke is certainly going to go. And they needed him tonight with that first half struggles that we saw from Cameron Boozer.
Yeah, let's get into the Boozer of it all, because he finished this game with 15 points, 13 rebounds. For most players, that's a great game. For Cameron Boozer, I think at the end of the season, 15 and 13 is going to feel like kind of par for the course for him. At least that's the expectations, the hope that people have for him this upcoming season. But he did not have any points in the first half of this game. He was 0 of 7, I believe it was, in the first half from the field, did not score. And credit to Jon Scheyer and Duke for running a play for him right out of halftime, which is what you want to do to get your star player going. They got him to the free throw line. He got a couple points at the line. He had a dunk about a minute after that. And at that point, there was still 18 minutes left in the game. Boozer only had 4 points, but you could feel the tide turn of like, okay, he's figured it out. He's kind of got that rhythm going. And even still at the end of the game, it's not like Boozer hit all of his shots in the second half. He just did a much better job of getting to the free throw line and converting there, finished 9 of 12 from the line. That's where most of his points came from. But for a young player who especially had so much hype coming into this season that reached a nuclear level when he had that 24.23 rebound game against Tennessee, it feels to me like it's probably a good thing overall that Duke was able to win with him having an off night, and that he was able to have that response in the second half after playing not nearly up to his level in the first half.
Yeah, the response was huge. You know that you can count on him moving forward when things aren't going his way. He finds other ways to impact the game. And then I think just once again, credit to Jon Scheyer in just his fourth season. I really am excited to see the more respect that he's getting as an X's and O's guys out there on the court. To your point, when a basketball player sees some free throws go down, it just feels like everything else opens up for them. And that's exactly what happened there for Cam Boozer. You mentioned the Tennessee outing. You could also throw in there the 33-12 that he had against UCF. Andy, our take here is shame on Cameron Boozer for setting the bar so high, averaging 28 and 17 in your combined exhibition games there, because you do start to feel a little underwhelmed with what we saw out of him against Texas.
Well, obviously, it's easy to focus on the offense and Evans and Boozer and things of that nature, but what really defined this team in this game, and what seems like it's going to define this team throughout the season, is what they're doing on the defensive end of the floor. Texas is a good basketball team. I think we saw that play out in this game. Texas is also a team that, like most teams, is going to get better as the year goes on. They have a lot of new pieces, obviously a new coach coming in Sean Miller, but this team really struggled in so much part because of what Duke was able to do defensively, knocking the ball loose constantly, really just getting right up in Texas's grill to the point where they were unable to get comfortable, unable to get into their sets. They finished this game shooting 32% from the field, under 30% from three. I think Duke had more steals than they had assists, I believe was the stat that I heard on the broadcast. Like this Duke team, we said it right before we went live here, JJ. It feels like Duke's going to have a really bad offensive game for them to lose because of how good they are on the other side of the floor.
And there's still room to improve on the other side of the floor. Like that's what I kept thinking about when you think about this Duke team. Yet again, the second straight year, Andy, where not a single scholarship player for Duke is shorter than 6'5". And yet when we were at halftime and you saw this Duke basketball team trailing by 1 point, there was a 10 rebound difference between the two teams. Like Duke wasn't even closing out their defensive possessions, rebounding the basketball. They did an excellent job of forcing tough shots, which is what Jon Scheyer defenses have done over the seasons. And yet credit to Texas for getting the rebounds and creating as many second chance opportunities that they had. They finished +7 in the offensive rebounds category, but then Duke in the second half made it a much more concerted effort. They won the rebounding battle in that second half, still were out rebounded by 4. But that's what I go to, Andy. That thought of it all, like, wow, if the defense isn't even getting these rebounds to close out possessions and they're already forcing you to take these really tough shots, it could have been a whole lot worse for Texas.
JJ, thank you so much for coming on. Always appreciate your insight, your expertise into what was a very fun basketball game on Tuesday. Really excited to see how the rest of this season plays out for Duke. I am positive we will have you on many more times to break down these fun games.
Yeah, so happy basketball is back and glad that Duke is very much so part of the conversation. Andy, thanks for having me here.
Well, folks, 3 other ranked teams played on Tuesday, although all of them were missing key starters. How did it impact them on the floor? We're going to talk about that in just a second. But first, folks, the NBA and college basketball are back, and there is no better place to get in on all of the basketball action than at FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you missed the start of a game or if you just want to ride out the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who's going to score next to those fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. It makes every game more exciting, especially when your team's making that late fourth quarter push. Not many great games on Wednesday. Creighton favored by 28.5 points over South Dakota, the only ranked team playing on Wednesday. LSU also in action against Tarleton State. They are 18.5-point favorites. If you like those lines, any of the other lines for Wednesday's slate, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 right now in bonus bets. Win your first $5 bet wins. So head to FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, folks, segment 2, still Andy Patton here, and we're still recapping Tuesday night college basketball action, the second day of the season. Not quite as exciting as the first day. We had 20 out of the 25 ranked teams in action on Monday, just 4 of the ranked teams in action on Tuesday, and then that final ranked team will debut on Wednesday. We'll get to that to close out the show with the Creighton Blue Jays, but for now, want to talk about those 3 other ranked teams because they are 3 of the top 10 teams in the country: Purdue, Kentucky, and Texas Tech, all in action on Tuesday night, but all of them took care of business as we expected them to do. No surprises, no shocking upsets took place on Tuesday. We'll start with Purdue, the number 1 team in the country, play in Evansville, knocked them off 82-51, the final score there, a 31-point win for Coach Painter. And they did this without Trey Kaufman-Renn, who was out for this game, and it was a sloppy start. And we're going to talk about that with Kentucky as well. Both teams kind of got off to sloppy starts. It was only 26-19 Purdue. Late in the first half, they were only up 7 points, but they went on a 10-0 run to close out the half and then just cruised to a pretty easy victory after that in the second half. Fletcher Loyer, who we will not have to apologize for today because he was outstanding in this one. 30 points for Loyer for this Purdue team, 7 of 10 from 3. He was absolute cash money in this one all game long. Braden Smith didn't do it as much on the scoring side of things, just 6 points for the point guard, but he did have 11 assists, 2 boards, 2 steals, and just 1 turnover. Again, we would call this a mediocre game for Braden Smith, and it featured 11 assists and 1 turnover. That is just how good and how dynamic he is as a playmaker and facilitator. He also moved into 3rd place in Big Ten history in total assists. He is now behind a pair of Michigan State Spartans in Cassius Winston and Mateen Cleaves. That is an incredible group to be part of for Braden Smith. He may have a real chance to move into 2nd place before all is said and done as well. Tough shooting night for the Boilermakers. Not having Trey Kaufman-Renn took away one of their main options offensively down on the block, but still ended up cruising to a 31-point win. Those guards in particular are going to be such a problem for opposing teams all season long. Next up, number 9, Kentucky. We're using the AP poll here. The Wildcats get their first win of the season over Nichols, 77-51, the final score here. We mentioned all of these teams, all of these ranked teams missing key players for Kentucky. They were without point guard Jaland Lowe, the transfer from Pitt, and it was pretty clear how much of an impact that made. Obviously, this was also true for Purdue and Trey Kaufman-Renn, but for Kentucky, without having seen Jaland Lowe on the court yet and knowing that they have so much depth, I mean, that's been the big talking point for Kentucky all offseason. Is this the deepest team in college basketball? They could go 10 deep, 12 deep, potentially. And yet what we saw, again, in a 26-point win, but what we saw was a team that seemed to struggle to be able to create advantages from their guards without Jaland Lowe on the floor. And it's not like they were bad. Denzel Aberdeen was great. I think he was plus 20 in this game coming off the bench. He played a really, really strong game. Otega Owe did some good things because he's very good. And the reason he was projected by many to be the SEC player of the year, but he only had 13 points, not exactly his strongest performance. But I think the main issue we saw with Kentucky was the offense just dragged, and they seemed to not have somebody who could go create an advantage, come off a screen, drive to the basket, pull some gravity, get somebody an open look. They just struggled to be able to do that throughout this game. And that was struggling against a team that, frankly, they shouldn't really be struggling with. That this was a 13-6 game at the under 8 media timeout, not the under 12, not the under 16. The 12 minutes into this basketball game, Kentucky had just 13 points. However, they had held Nichols to just 6 points. Kentucky only had 28 points at halftime, but they also held Nichols to just 15. And I think that's an important part of this conversation, similar to the conversation we just had with JJ about Duke, is that if Kentucky is going to be playing this level of defense, and yes, obviously the opponent quality matters, they are unlikely to hold any team in the SEC to 15 points in the first half. But if they can play this level of defense and they can just hound people and be aggressive and be able to do that because of the depth that they have, where they can just let guys go out there and just unleash them for 4 to 5 minute spurts and then sub guys in and just kind of be able to be relentless for a full 40 minutes, that's going to allow them to still win basketball games even when their shots aren't falling, even when the offense is maybe still a little disjointed in the early part of the season, which is pretty typical for any team in the modern era of college basketball, especially a team like Kentucky that has so many new faces. Now, one of the returners was the leader for Kentucky in this game. Again, we already mentioned Away, but he was not the leading scorer for Kentucky in this game. That was Colin Chandler, who had 15 points for the Cats. I'm very excited to see Colin Chandler this year. I think his playing time will certainly look different when Jaland Lowe is back, but Chandler was great in this game. Not only did he have 15 points, he had what might be the dunk of the year. And I know it's insane to be claiming that we have a dunk of the year candidate on the second day of the season, but if you haven't watched it, you got to go check it out. Got to go find the clip, come back to the show, check it out. It was an incredible dunk, brought the ball all the way back, cocked and loaded it. It was just a tremendous, tremendous dunk. Definitely check that one out if you haven't. Again, not the prettiest game for Kentucky, but they pick up a 26-point win despite shooting 26% from three in this one. They were only 12 of 22, 54.5% from the free throw line. You don't love that. You certainly don't love missing 10 free throws. You also I don't think you love only taking 22 of them. Against a team like this, you should be constantly getting to the free throw line, constantly drawing contact, cleaning up on the offensive glass. Again, not the strongest performance from Kentucky. Am I worried about them? No. They weren't fully healthy. This is a team that, again, has a ton of new faces. Any team right now is going to be struggling with that. I mean, the amount of really good ranked teams that were down in the first 8 minutes of their game, or even, only had a couple possession lead at halftime that ended up winning by 15, 20, 25 points. It's just part of the deal in the first week or so of the season, especially in the transfer portal era. So not anything concerning for Kentucky, but sure does feel like Jaland Lowe is going to be a big part of what this team does this year. Last up here, Texas Tech, 10th ranked Red Raiders. They took on Lindenwood, picked up a 38-point win, 98-60, the final score here. Not only the biggest margin of victory out of these games, but also the team missing the most talent from this game. They did not have JT Toppin, their All-American candidate. They also did not have LaJuan Watts, the Washington State transfer, who's kind of viewed as their replacement Darion Williams. At the three, they also did not have Luke Bamgoye as well. Three presumed starters or high-level rotation players not in the mix for Texas Tech, and yet they still go out there and nearly win by 40. The reason was simple. Christian Andersen. We have talked about him a lot on this podcast, and we are not alone in talking about Christian Andersen as an obvious breakout candidate for his sophomore season. He was good last year as a freshman. He exploded in the FIBA U19 tournament for Germany, and everybody said he's going to be a breakout dude for Texas Tech as a sophomore. He had 25 points, 8 assists, 2 steals on 8 of 12 shooting. Folks, that was at halftime. At halftime, he had 25 and 8. He finished the game with 34 points, 11 assists, 7 rebounds, 4 steals. That is a remarkable performance. That is a jaw-dropping stat line in a 48-minute NBA game. To do that in a 40-minute college basketball game where you're missing multiple starters is incredible. Christian Andersen might just be the biggest breakout candidate in all of college basketball. And honestly, if he plays anywhere close to this level, he's going to be an All-American at the end of this year. We're talking about JT Toppin being the obvious Big 12 All-American or Texas Tech All-American, Big 12 Player of the Year. There's a real chance that it's somebody else from Grant McCaslin's team the way that he played in this game. Also worth pointing out for the Red Raiders, they shot 45 threes in this game. 45 three-point attempts from Texas Tech. They made 17 of them, which is good for just under 38%. Sounds like that's a whole lot of misses, and it is, but 38% on over 40 attempts is going to win you pretty much every basketball game that you play. That was the case here. Again, LaJuan Watts, also a three-point shooter, so for him to not be playing in this game. Tyree Bryan, the transfer from Santa Clara, came in primarily for his three-point shooting. He's still dealing with an injury. It showed in this game. He was a little sluggish the way that he was moving. He also shot just 1 of 7 from 3. But for Texas Tech, Andersen and Donovan Atwell combined to shoot 9 of 20 from 3. If that's the kind of production you're getting from your backcourt, you're going to win pretty much every basketball game that you played. I maintain that Texas Tech is a very dangerous team. Yes, Lindenwood is outside the top 300 at KenPom. Yes, this is not a game that was expected to be competitive, but for them to be missing 3 key players and to beat the doors off of a D1 team behind a sophomore guard exploding for 34 points, this team is very, very dangerous. Well, folks, 24 out of the 25 ranked teams in the AP preseason poll have now played their first game of the season. The one that has not is the Creighton Blue Jays. We're going to talk about how they might look in the post-Ryan Kalkbrenner era and preview some other games from Wednesday's slate coming up here in just a second. All right, folks, segment 3, still Andy Patton, still Locked On College Basketball Podcast, and we are closing out the show getting you ready for the Wednesday slate in college basketball. And unfortunately, like I said at the beginning of the show, this kind of happens every year. And for those of you who have been longtime everyday listeners from the get-go, you may recall that Isaac and I's first ever episode of Locked On College Basketball, we lamented the lack of good games on the first day of the season. In year 2, there was a few better games. Year 3, even better. This year, great. You had the 2 really excellent games, Florida and Arizona, of course, Villanova and BYU as well. And so we don't have the right to complain about opening day not being as good as it used to be. But I do wish that they spread the love a little bit more, because the first days after opening day feel very, very slow. And I understand why. I get it. I'm not saying that all these teams should have to play on the first Thursday of the season. Like, I understand that's not how it's going to work, but I wish we had a better slate for Wednesday. I wish that the 5th of November had better games than the ones that we got. Here are there's only 14 games between Division I opponents on Wednesday. D1 versus D1, just 14 games. We're going to preview all of the games that feature a Power 5 team or a Power Conference team. That is just 7 games. That's it. Only one ranked team. That's the Creighton Blue Jays. They're taking on South Dakota, who is 305th at KenPom. South Dakota already played, by the way. They are 0-1 after losing to Utah Tech, 81-79. Nice little advantage for Creighton to be able to scout this team much more directly than other teams are able to do. This game is at 8 Eastern time on Peacock. By the way, FanDuel favors Creighton by 28.5 points. It'll be the first look at Greg McDermott's team in the post-Ryan Kalkbrenner era. Kalkbrenner spent 5 years at Creighton, was a 4-time Big East Defensive Player of the Year, is killing it in the NBA. If you haven't been watching for the Charlotte Hornets, he has been outstanding for that team. But this Creighton team, obviously losing Kalkbrenner is huge. Losing Stephen Ashworth, losing Pop Isaacs. Like, this is a team that's pretty reloaded in the transfer portal. But Coach McDermott's got himself a very, very good club. They go out and get Owen Freeman from Iowa. Tremendous talent, low post scoring threat. He's a little banged up right now. He's expected to play, but in the best case scenario for Creighton, he plays less than 20 minutes in this game because they don't need him to play any more than that. You also go out and get Josh Dix, also from Iowa, averaged 14 points per game last year for the Hawkeyes. Hasn't been great for them in the preseason yet, but I imagine he's going to find his groove here soon. Some mid-major transfers, Nick Graves, Blake Harper. You also got a freshman coming in Hudson Greer, a top 40 prospect in the 2025 class. And then you got some returners, guys like Ty Davis and Fedor Zugic, and of course the breakout candidate for them, Jackson McAndrew, who's going to start at the 4 alongside Freeman. This is a good, balanced, high-scoring offensive team. I worry about the front court defense. Even though I think Owen Freeman's a perfectly capable low-post defender, you're having to replace one of the greatest shot blockers and one of the greatest low-post defenders in modern college basketball history in Ryan Kalkbrenner. That is a tough deal for Freeman and for Coach McDermott to have to figure out. This team is also not going to have Kerem Conan. Their big man from Turkey is still dealing with some eligibility stuff, so he's not going to get a chance to suit up for the Blue Jays in this one. Also unclear if Jason Green will get to suit up or not, as he's dealing with an injury. Creighton should roll. We're not super concerned about the outcome here. They're going to win, whether it's by 25 or 30, unless you're betting on the game, is not a particularly of concern to me or to Coach McDermott. And the Blue Jays, they're going to be much more concerned about getting through this game, learning about this team, and getting ready for their next big matchup, which will come next Tuesday in Spokane against the Gonzaga Bulldogs. After that, we got, again, 6 more games to briefly touch on here with featuring power conference opponents. None of them are playing particularly competitive games. Rutgers will make their season debut at home against Rider. Rutgers 85th at Ken Pom, Rider 314th. So Rutgers in the Steve Peichel era, the post-Dylan Harper, Ace Bailey era for the Scarlet Knights here. Should get a W here. This game at 6 Eastern time on the Big Ten Network. And then Indiana. First game of the Darren DeVries era, 40th ranked team at Ken Pom. They are hosting Alabama A&M, who is 318th. This game is at 8 Eastern time on the Big Ten Network as well. FanDuel favors the Hoosiers by 25.5. This will be a fun one, again, if only to see Indiana's debut with Coach DeVries, with, of course, Darren's son, Tucker DeVries, who's projected to be this team's one of their, if not their leading scorer this year, if he can stay healthy. Lamar Wilkerson, great addition for them from Sam Houston State as well. Excited to see how Indiana looks this season, even if, again, this game won't be all that competitive, or shouldn't be all that competitive. Those are your 2 Big Ten games. Also got a pair of games in the Big East in addition to the Creighton game. So 3 total Big East games in action. Southern Indiana, 279 at Ken Pom, is heading out to Hinkle to take on the Butler Bulldogs, who are 72nd at Ken Pom. That game at 7 Eastern time on ESPN+. Going to be fun to see Coach Thad Matta's team. They bring in Michael Ajayi from Gonzaga, bring in some other talent in the transfer portal as well. Going to be fun to see how that team looks against a decent Southern Indiana team, but certainly a game that that Butler should win, and should win handily. Next up in the Big East, Southern, 177th at Ken Pom, is going out to Fiserv Forum to take on Marquette, 46th at Ken Pom, 8 Eastern time on ESPN+. FanDuel favors the Golden Eagles by 22.5. Shaka Smart's team continues to ignore the transfer portal, develop talent internally. Going to be fun to see Chase Ross and how he looks for this team. Ben Gold in the front court. Going to be some fun faces for Marquette this year. A lot of people are kind of down on Marquette because of how much talent they've lost. I'm still a believer in what this team does developmentally. We'll see if Royce Parham can take a leap, some other guys on this roster as well. But this will be a decent test. Again, a team they should beat, and a team they should beat by 15, 20 or so points. But compared to some of the other teams that some of these power conference teams are playing, this is far from the worst opponent that Marquette could have early in the season. 3 SEC teams in action on Wednesday. Georgia hosting Maryland Eastern Shore, who's 352nd at Ken Pom. Georgia's 37th, by the way. This game 7 Eastern on SEC Network Plus. FanDuel favoring the Bulldogs by 29.5. Going to be interesting to see how Georgia looks, having lost their best player, Silas Demery, from last year. Asa Newell goes to the NBA. Demery goes out to UConn. But this team does still have Blue Cane. They still have Somto Cyril. I think they're still going to be a dangerous team, but going to be hard to compete in the SEC, but they should get themselves an easy win here on night 1. LSU hosting Tarleton State is the next game here. The Tigers 56th at Ken Pom, Tarleton State 270th. This game 8 Eastern time on SEC Network Plus as well. LSU favored by 18.5. And then our last game here, North Alabama 227th at Ken Pom. They're traveling out to Starksville to take on Chris Jans and Mississippi State, who Ken Pom has just outside the top 25, has that Bulldogs team at 27th, 9 Eastern time on the SEC Network. FanDuel favoring Mississippi State by 23.5. 23.5, not only a good line for the game, but also a pretty good line in terms of how many points star guard Josh Hubbard is going to score for Mississippi State. He's a 20-point-per-game guy, consistently one of the better and more underappreciated scorers in all of college basketball. He should have himself. The only thing that's going to prevent him from getting 23 or more points is if he's benched for the second half of this game, because Mississippi State has it in the bag. But he is going to be one of the more fun players to watch in this conference and in all of college basketball yet again this upcoming season. All right, folks, that's going to wrap it up for me today here on Locked On College Basketball Podcast. Thank you so much to those of you who have made this show your first listen or your first watch of the day. Of course, a special shout out to those everydayers as well. I'll be back with you all on Thursday's show, getting you recaps of all of these games and getting you ready for the games going on Thursday as well. Thanks again, folks. Have a fantastic rest of your day. I said it, we don't have to say apologies to the Loyer family after hanging 30 in the game today. Cheers to the Mick Bruins. Let's go Wild Popes. And until next time, as always, peace out.